I always believed that life had a way of balancing itself out. You put in the effort, you play by the rules, and in return, you get some level of predictability. Turns out, life is more like a game rigged at the county fair. Just when you think you've got it figured out, you realize the ring toss is impossible and the guy running the booth is laughing at you behind your back. Take my marriage, for example. Kimberly and I had been married for 6 years. 6 solid, stable, utterly normal years. We had our routines, our habits, our shared jokes that only made sense to us. We weren't that annoying couple that posted anniversary tributes with captions like "still madly in love with my best friend." Red heart, but we were fine. At least, I thought we were. But as I've come to learn, when you think everything is fine, you're probably just the last one to know that it isn't. It started with the fridge. I came home from work one evening, walked into the kitchen, and opened the fridge to grab a cold drink. And there it was, an unopened bottle of sparkling water. Now, this might not sound like a moment of great revelation, but let me explain. Kimberly didn't drink sparkling water. She was a still water only kind of person, to the point where she once gave a waiter a 5-minute speech on why carbonation was an insult to nature. And yet, there it was. I closed the fridge. Stared at it. Opened it again. Yep. Still there. Now, there were only 2 logical explanations. Either Kimberly had suddenly developed a personality disorder that made her enjoy the sensation of drinking tiny, angry bubbles, or someone else had been here, someone who did like sparkling water. Most people would have shrugged it off. Maybe she had a guest over. Maybe she bought it by accident. But no, I knew my wife. Kimberly was the kind of person who checked expiration dates on salt. The woman did not make grocery mistakes. I didn't say anything that night. Or the next night. I just observed. And that's when I started noticing other things. A charger plugged into the wall by the couch. Kimberly's phone was always charged and she never, and I mean never, left chargers lying around. A new brand of coffee in the cabinet, strong, dark roast, the kind I liked but Kimberly always said tasted like burnt regret. And then, the final piece, a book on the nightstand. Not just any book. A thriller. Kimberly hated thrillers. She once called them lowbrow nonsense for people who think grocery store checkout lanes are libraries. And yet, there it was, sitting next to her usual stack of pretentious literary novels where the plot was usually about a woman staring out of a window for 400 pages. I stared at that book for a long time. Something was off. And unlike every protagonist in a thriller novel, I wasn't about to dismiss it as probably nothing. So I decided to test a theory. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. Kimberly was still asleep, so I went to the kitchen, grabbed the bottle of sparkling water, and placed it in the trash. Then I unplugged the charger from the wall and stuck it in the drawer. Finally, I took the book and put it under the couch. Then, I waited. The first sign came at breakfast. Kimberly walked into the kitchen, yawned, and then, casually, opened the fridge. She froze. It was the briefest of pauses, but I saw it. That flicker of surprise. Like someone checking their bank account expecting to see a number and instead finding out they'd somehow funded a small country's military budget. "Huh," she said, voice too neutral. "Did you take out the trash?" "Yep," I said, sipping my coffee. She nodded slowly. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. An hour later, I watched her circle the living room twice, glancing toward the couch but never looking under it. Then, as I stood in the hallway pretending to scroll through my phone, she walked toward the drawer, opened it, and stood there, staring. "Lose something?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She closed the drawer. Too quickly. Nope. And that was it. That was all the confirmation I needed. Now, I knew what I should have done. Confront her. Ask her outright. But where's the fun in that? No, I wanted to see how far this would go. So I kept playing my little game. Every day, I moved something. Nothing big, just enough to make her second guess herself. A pillow slightly out of place. A pair of sunglasses that weren't mine, mysteriously appearing and then disappearing again. A text sent from her phone to my phone, reading nothing but "whoops, sorry, wrong person." That one was my favorite. The look on her face when she saw it? Priceless. Then, one evening, I came home to find Kimberly sitting at the table, staring at me like a disappointed teacher who just caught a student drawing in their textbook. "Stephen," she said. "Have you been moving things?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, it just feels like things are different." She gestured vaguely around the room, as if pointing out the difference between air molecules. "Like stuff isn't where it should be." I shrugged. "Maybe you're just imagining things." She squinted at me. "Right." And then, she tried to drop it. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up extra early. Kimberly was still in bed, curled up on her side. I slipped out of the room, tiptoed to the living room, and carefully placed her car keys in the fridge. Then, I sat on the couch and waited. 40 minutes later, there was the usual morning chaos: coffee brewing, makeup routine, last-minute rush. Then, where are my? Silence. And then, the fridge door opened. Another long silence. I turned my head just in time to see Kimberly standing there, holding her car keys like they were evidence in a murder trial. I grinned. Lose something? That was the moment I knew. The exact second she realized that I knew. She didn't say a word. Just put the keys in her purse and walked out the door. By lunchtime, I had a text message. "We need to talk." "I bet we do, Kimberly." "I bet we do." The thing about a message like "we need to talk" is that it never actually means we need to talk. It means I need to talk, and you need to sit there and listen while I act like I have a valid reason for whatever nonsense I'm about to say. So, naturally, I ignored it. I went about my day like I hadn't just successfully cracked open the mystery that was my wife's new personality. I went to work, sat through meetings, responded to emails with my usual mix of boredom and passive aggression, and even found time to look up private investigators, not because I needed one at this point, but because I figured it might be fun to pretend I was in some kind of spy movie. Kimberly, however, was persistent. By noon, another message popped up. "Stephen. Seriously." I ignored that one too. Then, another. "Are you free for dinner?" Ah, there it was. The classic distract with a meal approach. As if food was some kind of magic shield against the truth. As if I would sit across from her, chewing on something overpriced, and suddenly forget that she had somehow acquired a secret life inside our very normal, very shared home. I texted back. "Sure. 7 p.m. I figured, why not? At the very least, this would be entertaining. When I got home, Kimberly was already there, sitting on the couch like someone who had been waiting too long but wanted to pretend they hadn't. Her phone was next to her. Face down. Because of course it was. "You're home early," she said, her voice trying too hard to be casual. I shrugged. Figured I'd make it in time for this very important conversation. She smiled. Not in the way that meant she was happy, but in the way that meant she was carefully choosing what version of herself to present. I sat down across from her, stretching my legs, making myself comfortable. If this was going to be a show, I wanted the best seat. Kimberly cleared her throat. "Stephen." I raised an eyebrow. "Kimberly." She exhaled sharply, like she had just realized this wouldn't be easy. "Good." "So," she started, "I feel like things have been different." I nodded. "Yep. I mean, between us," she added. "Imemvum." Her lips pressed together. "Would you stop doing that?" "Doing what?" "The whole, vague, one-word thing." "Oh, sure." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Go ahead." She hesitated. I could see the wheels turning in her head, running through her usual tricks, trying to pick the right one. This was the part where I would usually step in, offer some kind of reassurance, play the role of the reasonable husband who just wanted everything to be okay. Not this time. I feel like we're not communicating, she said finally, her voice soft, deliberate. Like we've been out of sync. Out of sync. That was a new one. Not distant, not struggling, but out of sync, as if our marriage was some kind of malfunctioning Bluetooth connection. I nodded again. Could be. She stared at me, waiting for me to expand on that. I didn't. Kimberly shifted in her seat. Stephen, I don't know if I did something to upset you, but you've been acting strange lately. I held back a laugh. I've been acting strange? I leaned back. You know, that's interesting. Because I was going to say the same thing about you. Her expression flickered. Just for a second. It was subtle, but I caught it like a tiny crack in a perfect surface. She folded her arms. What's that supposed to mean? I tapped my fingers on the armrest, pretending to think. I don't know, Kimberly. It's just little things. Like how you suddenly developed an appreciation for carbonated beverages. Or how a mysterious thriller novel appeared on your nightstand, despite the fact that you once called them literary junk food for people with no standards. Kimberly blinked. Oh, and let's not forget the phone charger that lives in our living room now. Who knew that after 6 years of never leaving chargers around, you'd suddenly decide to switch things up? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I tilted my head. You see where I'm going with this? She swallowed. Stephen, if you... Because here's the thing, I continued, I would have never noticed any of it if it had been just one thing. But when you add it all up, it paints a pretty interesting picture. Almost like, I paused, pretending to search for the right words. Like someone else has been spending time here. Silence. She didn't look surprised. Not really. Which told me everything I needed to know. Finally, she exhaled. Stephen, I don't want us to turn this into something bigger than it is. I laughed. Oh, trust me, Kimberly, I didn't turn this into something bigger than it is. You did. She leaned forward. Look, I can explain. Can you? I asked, genuinely curious. Because I'd love to hear it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again. Nothing. I watched her fumble for words, knowing full well that anything she said now would just be an attempt to patch a sinking ship. So I decided to help her out. I stood up. She looked up at me, startled. Where are you going? I stretched. Oh, I just realized I forgot something important. What? I turned to face her, a grin creeping onto my face. I forgot to mention that I already know everything. And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving Kimberly sitting there, mouth slightly open, staring at the realization that this wasn't going to go the way she planned. This was going to be fun. The thing about dropping a bomb like I already know everything and then walking away is that it does something magical to a guilty person. It doesn't just make them panic, it makes them start tripping over themselves in real time. It's like pushing over the first domino and watching the whole setup collapse, except the person who built it is running around trying to stand them back up while pretending nothing's wrong. And let me tell you, Kimberly was in full damage control mode. She followed me into the bedroom, her footsteps quick, her voice carefully controlled. Stephen, hold on. I didn't turn around. Just grabbed a clean shirt from the dresser and tossed it onto the bed. For what? She folded her arms, tilting her head in that way she always did when she thought she could manage me. What do you think you know? I smiled. Oh, you know. Everything. A flicker of hesitation. That half-second pause where she considered whether to deny, deflect, or stall. I had seen this look before, usually when she got caught miscalculating how many Amazon packages were supposed to arrive in 1 week. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally, going for the classic if I act confused, maybe he'll get confused too strategy. I nodded. Oh yeah, totally. You're right. I must have imagined the fact that our home suddenly turned into a hotel for someone with different reading habits, beverage preferences, and phone charging needs. Maybe I have a secret second personality that loves thrillers and sparkling water. She exhaled sharply. Stephen, you're being. What? I interrupted. Unreasonable? Paranoid? Crazy? I turned to face her, arms crossed. Or maybe I'm just paying attention. She pressed her lips together, realizing I wasn't in the mood for whatever script she had planned. That's when she switched gears. She took a slow breath, softening her posture. Look, if something's bothering you, we can talk about it. I don't want you to feel like. I laughed. Kimberly, I love how you just assumed I'm the one feeling something instead of the one figuring something out. A slight twitch in her jaw. Okay, so tell me. What exactly do you think you know? Now, this was the fun part. Because here's the thing, if I laid it all out at once, she'd have room to backpedal, adjust, and try to maneuver out of it. But if I made her work for it, if I gave her just enough rope, she'd tie herself in knots trying to escape a trap she couldn't even see. So I did the only logical thing. I smiled. Shrugged. And said, "Oh, I'm not sure yet." Her face didn't move, but I could feel the shift. The calculation. The immediate, frantic assessment of how much I could possibly know and what was still safe to deny. She forced a small chuckle. So you're saying you think you know something, but you don't actually know anything? I nodded. Yep. Silence. A long one. Kimberly stared at me, realizing she had just stepped onto a minefield with no idea where the explosives were buried. And I just stood there, watching her think. It was a beautiful moment. Finally, she exhaled, putting on her rational adult voice. Stephen, this is ridiculous. If something's wrong, just tell me. I grabbed my shirt, pulled it over my head, and stretched. Nah, I'm good. Her eyebrows pulled together. You're good? Yep. Another pause. Longer this time. And then, the inevitable happened. The thing I had been waiting for. She got nervous. She wasn't sure if she should be defensive or calm. She wasn't sure if she should accuse me of being irrational or pretend to be understanding. So she did what all guilty people do when they realize they don't have control over the conversation. She bluffed. Well, I don't have anything to hide, she said, arms folding again. So if you're expecting me to admit to something, I hope you're not disappointed. I nodded. Good to know. Another silence. I could see it happening, the gears in her head grinding against each other, her brain trying to decide whether she had just won or just walked into a trap. She inhaled. Exhaled. Then, casually, she said, So, what are you doing this weekend? I almost laughed out loud. The sheer whiplash of it. Oh, I said, pretending to think. Maybe a little cleaning. Maybe some reading. Maybe some unexpected revelations. Kimberly's smile twitched. What does that mean? I glanced at the clock. Oh, look at the time. I stepped past her, grabbing my keys. I'll let you know. And then, before she could say another word, I walked out. Now, was I actually going anywhere important? No. But did I want to give her time? Absolutely. Because here's the thing, guilty people don't sit still. They move. They call, they text, they try to control the situation before it spirals. So I went for a little drive. Not aimlessly, of course, I had a destination in mind. A friend's place. Someone who knew a guy. Someone who could help me dig just a little deeper. Because this wasn't over. This was just getting started. The moment I walked out, I knew exactly what was going to happen. Kimberly was going to panic. Not the full-blown, screaming into a pillow kind, but the subtle kind, the kind where she'd frantically check her phone, resist the urge to call someone, pace around the house pretending she wasn't unraveling, then finally cave and try to fix things before I learned too much. And I was counting on it. I got in my car, drove 5 minutes down the road, then parked in the lot of a hardware store. Not because I needed anything, but because I wanted to be somewhere that wasn't home when Kimberly inevitably made her next move. And sure enough, it came faster than I expected. My phone buzzed. "Where are you?" I smiled. A single text. Short. Neutral. But that wasn't a just wondering kind of message. That was a "please tell me you're just buying milk and not hiring a lawyer" kind of message. I didn't reply. A minute later, another one. "Can we talk?" "Of course we can, Kimberly. I just prefer this version of talking, the one where you don't get to steer the conversation into some sentimental nonsense about us." Still, I ignored it. And then, the best one yet. "You're acting weird, Steven." "Oh, I'm the one acting weird?" "Sure. It's completely normal for people to suddenly change their reading habits, hydration preferences, and interior decorating choices, but I am the problem." I locked my phone and sat back, waiting. If Kimberly was truly worried, she'd try to get ahead of whatever she thought I knew. If I was just being weird, she wouldn't bother. 10 minutes later, she made her move. A call. I let it ring. Then another. I let that one ring, too. And then, finally, exactly what I was waiting for, she tried calling someone else. Now, under normal circumstances, a wife making a phone call wouldn't be suspicious. But the thing is, Kimberly never made random calls. She was a texter. Always had been. She once spent an entire 2-hour call with her sister complaining about how some people don't respect personal space, and then spent the next 5 years refusing to answer my calls if I so much as thought about dialing her during work hours. So why was she suddenly breaking her own rules? I opened the tracking app on my phone, the one we both had installed after she forgot where she parked at the mall that one time and made me spend an hour helping her look for her car. Kimberly's dot was still at home. She wasn't calling someone she was meeting up with. She was calling someone she needed information from. I made a mental note. Then, just to be extra annoying, I sent her a single text back. "Busy. Later." Within seconds, she replied. "Steven, this is important." I bet it is. I put my phone in my pocket and walked into the hardware store. Again, I didn't need anything, but I wanted her to sit with the silence for a bit. I strolled through the aisles, pretending to consider buying a power drill, before heading back to my car. When I checked my phone again, Kimberly had gone radio silent. Perfect. I drove home, parked, and walked in like nothing had happened. Kimberly was sitting on the couch, looking at her phone. The moment she saw me, she put it down. Face down, of course. "You didn't answer my calls," she said, keeping her tone casual. I shrugged. "Yeah, I was busy." "With what?" I smiled. "Oh, you know. Just thinking." She nodded slowly, pretending she wasn't losing her mind. "Thinking about what?" I sat down across from her. "About us." Now that got her attention. Kimberly straightened slightly, eyes scanning my face for any hint of what I was about to say. And I let the silence drag. Just enough to make her sweat. Then I sighed. "Kimberly, do you think people ever just change?" She blinked. "What? Like, do you think someone can just wake up one day and suddenly be a completely different person?" She hesitated. "I mean, people grow. They evolve." I nodded. "Yeah. But what if it happens really fast? Like, overnight. Like someone who hates thrillers suddenly reads one. Or someone who never drinks sparkling water suddenly buys it." The flicker of panic in her eyes was delicious. She forced a smile. "Steven, are you seriously upset about a book and a bottle of water?" I leaned back, stretching. "Oh no, not at all. It's just fascinating, you know? The way people change so quickly." She shifted in her seat. "Is this your way of telling me something? Because if you're trying to make a point, just say it." I grinned. Nah, just talking. Silence. Then, after a long pause, she cleared her throat. Stephen, if something's on your mind, I think we should just be honest with each other. Ah, the we should be honest card. Classic. I nodded. I agree. Let's do that. Her fingers curled slightly against her knee. Okay, so? I smiled. You first. She hesitated. Then I don't know what you want me to say. I stood up. All right, well, when you figure it out, let me know. And just like that, I walked out again. Because here's the thing, Kimberly was waiting for me to confront her. She was ready for the classic angry husband demands answers scene. She had rehearsed for it. Had her excuses lined up. But she wasn't prepared for this. She wasn't prepared for me to know something, but not everything. She wasn't prepared for me to let her sit with the uncertainty of how much I knew. And that's what made it fun. Because I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to make her reveal it herself. One step at a time. After I walked out, I gave Kimberly about 20 minutes before I came back inside. Not because I had anywhere to be, but because I wanted to give her just enough time to stew in her own thoughts without recovering completely. Let her brain start building up excuses, then yank the floor out from under her before she could stack them properly. When I walked in, she was standing in the kitchen, staring at the sink like it had personally wronged her. She hadn't touched her phone. That meant whatever conversation she had been about to have before I left was still hanging in the air, unresolved. Good. She turned when she heard me. Where did you go? I grabbed a glass of water and took my time drinking it before answering. Just outside. Thought I'd get some fresh air. She nodded slowly, arms crossed. So, are you going to tell me what's actually going on? I put my glass down. I already did. I was just thinking. About us, she said, voice careful. I nodded. Yep. Silence. Then, she exhaled like she had just made a tough decision. Okay. I think we should just talk about this openly. I leaned on the counter. Go ahead. She hesitated. Stephen, are you happy in this marriage? I almost laughed. There it was. The defensive strike. When guilty people feel like they're on the edge of being exposed, they try to turn the conversation into a relationship discussion. Make it seem like the issue is mutual instead of one-sided. I shrugged. I thought I was. She gave a small, rehearsed nod. I just feel like maybe we've been going through some changes, and maybe we haven't been as connected as we used to be. I tilted my head. What changes? Another hesitation. I don't know, just little things. We don't talk the way we used to. I smiled. We're talking now. She sighed. Stephen, you know what I mean. I nodded. Oh, I do. I just think it's interesting that you're suddenly so eager to have a deep conversation now, instead of, say, 2 weeks ago. Her fingers curled slightly against her arm. So this is about something. I pretended to think. I mean, I don't know. What do you think it's about? She gave a forced little chuckle. Stephen, can we just be honest with each other? I grinned. That's what I've been saying. She took a deep breath. Then she said, very softly, are you cheating on me? I stared at her for a full 3 seconds. Then I burst out laughing. Kimberly blinked, caught off guard. I wiped at my eye. Oh, that's good. That's real good. You actually thought that would work, huh? Her jaw tightened. It's not a joke. Oh no, of course not. You were seriously about to flip this on me. That's impressive. I nodded, genuinely amused. Tell me, Kimberly, what exactly was your plan here? Were you gonna act devastated? Say you knew something was off? Maybe even cry a little? She swallowed. I don't know why you're acting like this. I leaned in slightly. Because it's fun watching you squirm. Her expression flickered. And then, finally, I saw it. The moment she broke. She looked away. Just for a second. A tiny, almost unnoticeable thing. But it was enough. She had been caught. She knew she had been caught. But she still wasn't going to say it. Not yet. She pressed her lips together, like she was trying to think through the next move. I just feel like we've been off, she said finally. And I don't want there to be any secrets between us. I grinned. Oh, me neither. I love honesty. She nodded. So, if there's anything you want to tell me, Oh no, Kimberly, I cut in, you first. Her face twitched. I don't have anything to say. I shrugged. That's a shame. Silence. Then she tried to regain control. Stephen, I don't know why you're being so. Do you know what I did today? I interrupted. She hesitated. What? I smiled. I made a few calls. Her shoulders tensed. Talked to some people, I continued, my voice light. Got some interesting information. She forced a small laugh. Stephen, I don't know what you're. Who's been here? I asked, cutting straight to it. Her breath caught for just a second. Barely. But I saw it. I tilted my head. Go ahead. Lie to me. She swallowed. Stephen, I let the silence drag. And then, finally, the first crack appeared. She exhaled. Can we just sit down? I leaned back. Oh, now you want to sit down? Her fingers tapped against the counter. Stephen, please. I pretended to consider it. Then I sighed. All right. Let's sit. We walked to the living room. Kimberly sat down, folding her hands in her lap like she was about to deliver some kind of serious news. I sat across from her, arms crossed, waiting. She took a deep breath. Stephen, I don't want you to be mad. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, that's promising. She looked down. There's been someone I've been talking to. I smiled. No kidding. She flinched slightly. I leaned back. So? Who is he? She hesitated. Come on, Kimberly. If we're being honest now, let's get to the good part. She looked at her hands. His name is Ryan. I grinned. Ah, Ryan. Great. And when did Ryan become your personal guest? Another hesitation. I waited. Finally, she sighed. A few months ago. I nodded. And what, exactly, has Ryan been doing here? She swallowed. We just talk. I laughed. Oh, that's a classic. Stephen. No, I love that. I grinned. Two grown adults just talking in a house that one of them doesn't live in. That's completely normal. Her jaw tightened. It's not. Oh, don't start, I said, shaking my head. We both know where this is going. Silence. She exhaled. I didn't mean for. I held up a hand. Nope. Don't finish that sentence. You did. You just didn't expect to get caught. Kimberly looked down. I let the silence drag again. Then I stood up. She looked up. Stephen, please. I held up a hand. Nope. You had plenty of chances to be honest. You picked lies. I turned toward the door. And now, it's my turn to decide what happens next. And with that, I walked out. Because I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I didn't slam the door on my way out. That would have been too dramatic. Too emotional. And if there was one thing I wanted Kimberly to understand, it was that I wasn't emotional about this. I wasn't throwing a fit. I wasn't storming off like the wounded husband in some cheap soap opera. I was done. And she didn't get to be the one who decided how this ended. I stood outside for a moment, just long enough to let the weight of the silence settle. I knew exactly what was happening inside. Kimberly was probably sitting there, staring at the floor, trying to figure out her next move. Should she chase after me? Should she wait? Should she cry? Should she pretend to be angry that I was walking away? None of it mattered. Because I wasn't giving her time to control the situation anymore. I walked to my car, but I didn't drive away just yet. Instead, I leaned against the hood, pulled out my phone, and made a call. "Hey," I said when the other person picked up. "I need a favor." The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I had trouble sleeping actually, I had the best sleep I'd had in months. But because I had things to do. I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and headed back home. Kimberly was in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked up immediately, eyes scanning my face for any sign of what I was thinking. She had probably been waiting for me all night, expecting me to come back with a speech, maybe an ultimatum. Something she could argue against. She didn't get one. "Morning," I said, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. She blinked. "Where were you?" I poured myself some water. "Out." Silence. I took a sip and set the glass down. "So? You thought about what you're gonna do next?" Her forehead creased. "What I'm going to do?" I nodded. "Yeah. Because this isn't our problem anymore. It's yours." That threw her off. "Stephen." I held up a hand. "No, let's just skip to the important part. I'm not asking for explanations. I don't need a timeline. I don't care about the details. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." Her jaw tightened. "Which is?" I smiled. "I want a divorce." She flinched like she hadn't been expecting me to say it first. "Stephen, wait." "Nope," I cut in, shaking my head. "You don't get to be the one who decides how this conversation goes. You don't get to start crying now and act like this is some big, sad misunderstanding. We're way past that." Her hands clenched into fists. "You're not even going to let me explain?" I raised an eyebrow. "Explain what?" "How you didn't mean for it to happen. How it wasn't serious. How you just needed something different." I shook my head. "I've heard it all before. You're not special, Kimberly." She swallowed. "I never wanted to hurt you." I let out a short laugh. "Oh, that's a classic. The I hurt you, but I didn't mean to defense." I leaned against the counter. "Be honest, Kimberly. You just didn't think you'd get caught." She exhaled sharply. "You're twisting this." "No, I'm finally seeing it for what it is," I said. "You got bored. You wanted attention. You found someone fool enough to give it to you. Simple." Her eyes flashed with something: anger, frustration, maybe even guilt. But I didn't care. "Stephen, can we just?" "Nope." I pushed off the counter. "We're done here." She stared at me. "You're really just walking away?" I grabbed my phone and wallet. "Yep. But we've been together for years." "Exactly," I said, heading toward the door. "And you threw it away. So now I'm doing the same." She took a step forward. "Stephen, please, can we just?" I turned back one last time. "Kimberly, if you really wanted to fix this, you would have been honest before I had to drag it out of you." I opened the door. "But you weren't. And that tells me everything I need to know." I stepped outside. And I didn't look back. 3 weeks later, the papers were filed. Kimberly tried to reach out a few times. A text here, a call there. I ignored every single one. Ryan, as expected, didn't stick around. Turns out, guys who sneak around with married women aren't exactly known for their long-term commitment skills. Shocking. I moved out before she did, found a place I actually liked, and didn't waste a single minute looking at the past. And you know what? It felt great. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't being lied to. I wasn't being played. I wasn't being managed. I was just free. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and rate the story in the comments.